Hi everyone, welcome back to Cabin Crafts and Simple Living, and I am beyond excited. I'm absolutely giddy about the video today. Over this past weekend, I went and did a craft show in Hermann, Missouri, which is a very German community, and I took my chalkware and my Moravian stars, and the lady across from me, the booth that was across from me, was the lady that provides my cookie molds for my store and my website. She also lives here in Missouri. And at the end of the day, she showed me this mold. And it's two-sided. And on one side is this very Pennsylvania Dutch looking vase of flowers. And on this side is a lady. So you can see that this is very thick. And this is an exact replica of Christopher Ludwig's cookie mold. It was originally had been donated to Valley Forge Museum, and then Valley Forge Museum wound up becoming the Museum of the American Revolution, which is where the original mold is today. And so I did a video already about Christopher Ludwig based on this little book, Gingerbread for Liberty. And I love anything colonial Revolutionary War. That's my passion. And when I found out the story about Christopher Ludwig, it just really spoke to me because I love gingerbread. I love to make gingerbread. And so when she showed me this mold and that it was an exact replica of one of my heroes, I had to have it. And so I bought it over the weekend, and I made some gingerbread with it, which I'll show you here in a minute. But just a little bit more about Christopher Ludwig. He came to America in the 1750s with very little money. He got married. He wound up being very prosperous. He had 4 or 5 homes in Philadelphia. He had a farm in Germantown, which was the rural area surrounding Philadelphia, and he wound up being very wealthy. Around the time of the American Revolution, he wanted to join. He was a staunch patriot, and he wanted to help the cause, the glorious cause, as Washington called it. But he was 55 years old. So he told Washington that he could bake bread for the Continental Army, and that's what he wound up doing. And he even put up the money for his own bake ovens, and he would travel ahead of the Continental Army. He would find out from Washington where the army was going to go next, and he would get there ahead and start baking bread so that the Continental soldiers would have fresh baked hot bread when they arrived. A lot of the time, and you've heard about how poor they were at Valley Forge and some of the horrible places, Morristown, where the soldiers hardly had anything to eat. He would sell a house to pay for flour and what he needed to bake bread. So he really was an asset to General Washington. Washington called him his baker general. He used his own money to make the bread ovens that traveled with the army. And it says that he was of immeasurable service to the cause of the American Revolution. But one of the coolest things I found out was that when the Hessian mercenaries started coming to America that were hired by the British to fight for the revolution on their side, they were from Hesse, which is in Germany, and Christopher Ludwig is a German, and he could speak fluent German. So he heard that the capture of 8 Hessian soldiers were taken as prisoners during the Battle of Germantown. And so he immediately went to the military headquarters for the Patriots and convinced the commander-in-chief to place those 8 prisoners in his hands, and he would be absolutely responsible for them. He then took it upon himself to serve as their host and guide. He showed them all around Philadelphia and the surrounding vicinity, and he was able to show these 8 men how well the citizens of Germany were prospering there. He pointed out how comfortably the German families of the area were housed, what fine churches they had. He spoke of the freedom that they had and independence to pursue their own avocations in Philadelphia without intrusion. Even people who had humbler careers were living happily in America, so it didn't matter if you were a prince or a pauper, you could live like a king. So when Ludwig dismissed those 8 men, he told them to go back and talk to their regiments and inform their fellow soldiers of all they had seen. And he encouraged them to desert the British Army and come over to the American side and fight for the Patriots. And it is said that Ludwig's influence on those few 8 men resulted in many, many Germans who decided to become citizens of Philadelphia, many of whom afterwards became prosperous citizens, and they wound up fighting for the American cause. Now, one day I was watching, it was either Finding Your Roots with Henry Louis Gates, or it was Who Do You Think You Are? It's those genealogy shows. And they were doing Rob Lowe, the actor Rob Lowe. Well, come to find out, Rob Lowe is descended from one of those German Hessians who came to America to fight for the Revolution, but then deserted the British Army and wound up fighting for the Patriot cause. And he did not know that. He was so excited about that. My 5 times great-grandmother is from Hesse. Her name was Augusta Herzinger. My maiden name is Herzinger, or Herzinger. And she was from Hesse. And so I kind of feel like, I wonder if Rob Lowe's great-great-great-great-great-grandfather was one of those 8 original ones, or if they were just one of the ones that the 8 had talked to and convinced to join the Patriot side. But I thought that is a really neat story, that he found out that his ancestors came to America from Germany to fight for the British and wound up deserting and fighting for the Americans. So yeah, a little bit more about Christopher Ludwig. He was such an important part of the army, and George Washington would invite him to his dinner parties, and he would call him my honest friend. And even up to the point where the last big battle of the Revolution, Yorktown, where General Cornwallis surrendered, Washington noticed that the British soldiers were underfed, they were hungry, they were not in very good shape, and he asked Christopher Ludwig to bake. He baked 6,000 pounds of bread for the enemy soldiers. That's 3 tons. 3 tons of bread. Can you imagine how much flour that would have been? And this was in one day. 6,000 pounds of bread. Now, he had bakers under him, so I'm sure it was kind of like an assembly line. But Christopher Ludwig and his fellow bakers made 6,000 pounds of bread in one day. And they were able to provide much needed nourishment to the soldiers of Washington after that particularly long battle, and the British. But this man used up all of his money to support the American Revolution, the glorious cause. And so when he finally returned home, he found that the British had ransacked his home in Philadelphia. He had one bare bed to sleep on, no sheets, no mattress, no nothing. And he was pretty much bankrupt. And such a great story of an American comeback, he went back to baking gingerbread and made a very lucrative living out of it. He and his wife only had one child who was born and then died in infancy, so they had no children. And he had a soft spot in his heart for children. And in 1798, Philadelphia experienced a huge yellow fever epidemic, which is what we call malaria today. And many, many, many people died. And a lot of the wealthy and nobility and, the bigwigs left Philadelphia for the countryside to escape this plague. And Washington was president at the time and in Philadelphia, but he did not leave, and neither did Martha. And it's said that Christopher Ludwig would bake bread for the poor and sick and needy that were still left in Philadelphia and give it to them for free. When he died, he left $13,000 to the city of Philadelphia to fund a charitable trust for the schooling and education of poor children of all denominations in the city and liberties of Philadelphia, without exception to the country, extraction, or religious principles of their parents or friends. The Christopher Ludwig Foundation remains active in its mission to the present day. It gives out $200,000 in scholarships of education every year, and he is buried in St. Michael's Lutheran Cemetery. I think this is the coolest story, and if you get the chance to buy this book and read it to your kids and grandkids, I've read it to mine, but it's called Gingerbread for Liberty. And so back to the mold. So the lady that makes these molds, what she does is she gets an original antique mold and she makes a resin cast of it. And this is the original cast. This is an original cast of Christopher Ludwig's mold. You can see like where there's wood grain or whatever where it's been used. and it's very thick because it was two-sided. So one side says House on the Hill, which is her cookie mold company, and then the other says original owned by Christopher Ludwig, Museum of the American Revolution collection. So you can Google Christopher Ludwig's cookie mold and see the original, and it looks exactly like this one. I mean, this looks like the real deal. It was $120 retail, and I was willing to pay any price for it, but she gave me a deal because I'm one of her vendors. She gave me a discount. But so I couldn't wait to get home and make some gingerbread cookies. So I did. And thankfully you've got me to find out what all of the troubleshooting is, because I did have some problems at first. But I made half the recipe. It comes with a recipe card. Museum of the American Revolution has the recipe on the back, Christopher's story on the front. And so this is the lady. Now hold it up, and it's been glazed, so the glaze seeps into all those little nooks and crannies. So this is the lady side of the mold, and then this is the flower side of the mold. And oh my gosh, I wish we had smell-o-vision. This has been glazed. This is just a water, a sugar, and vanilla glaze. And then when it dries, it turns white, goes in all those little nooks and crannies, and it is delicious. So anyway, I made the cookies, and I had trouble at first. The directions say to roll your dough out to 3/8 of an inch thick, and I've got those spacers for my rolling pin, and I put the 3/8 inch spacer on there, and I had all kinds of trouble. I couldn't get the middle impressions to go in there really good on either side. So like you'll see, let me find one if I've got one that's not that great. I ate the head off of the one that was not good. I bit her head off. Here's one of the flowers, and you can see it's kind of lost a lot of it in the center. So I watched actually a YouTube video from George Washington's Mount Vernon, and their chef was making gingerbread cookies. Now I didn't see this until after mine were all done, but what I did was I rolled out my dough thicker than 3/8 of an inch, and then I pressed my cookie block into the top of the dough, and because it was thicker, then it got the center part. But the guy at Mount Vernon took a big hunk of, he rolled out a piece of dough that was big enough to fit this, laid it on top of the cookie mold, and then took his rolling pin and rolled it into the mold, and then he draped it off, and it was perfect. So I could do that next time. But these all then started working when I just went with thicker dough. So this is how they turned out. I made half of this recipe. It made 8 big cookies, 4 of the women and 4 of the flowers. And I can't have flour, so this was killing me. I'm going to try and make a gluten-free version. But I did bite off the lady's head just to see if they were tasting good. And then this morning when I came into the kitchen, I can see where hubby had some samples. So anyway, I hope that you have enjoyed this video. Like I said, Google Christopher Ludwig. It's Ludwick. Christopher Ludwig's cookie mold. And Google Images will pull up images of his original mold. It looks exactly like this. If you want a mold, like I said, it retails for $120. You can message me, and I will order some from Letha Meisner. That's the lady that owns the cookie mold company. And as I said, it comes with the card of authenticity, the recipe, and it even says it on the side that the original is in the Museum of the American Revolution. So I hope you really enjoyed my Gingerbread for Liberty video and got to see the kind of cookies that this makes. Oh, I wanted to show you one more thing. I've been making gingerbread for years. Gingerbread is near and dear to my heart. And in my cabinet behind me here, oops, I've got a little thing of gingerbread men. These are real. Some of them have raisin buttons and juniper berry eyes. This one I tied a jute string around. This guy's naked. These I made with red hots for buttons. This one turned out a little bit better. These were made in 1994. And so what I did to preserve them, so they're 30 years old. And they've been sitting in my redware cabinet for 21 years. But I dipped these in wax. So, you know, if you look back at my other videos where I show you dipping the Moravian stars in wax, or I dip the fall leaves in wax to preserve my fall leaves, I also started dipping gingerbread men in wax and selling them as ornaments back in the 90s. And I've still got all of these little guys. And believe it or not, they still smell. So I hope you enjoyed my gingerbread video. And like I said, if you want one, just contact me. Put those guys back to bed. Just contact me and let me know. Since it is so expensive, I probably will have to require payment up front. But if you want one, message me. I will try to remember to put the recipe, the gingerbread recipe, in the what is it called? In the description, in the YouTube description. So please like and share my video and subscribe if you're not subscribed. It will really help me a lot. And in the future, I'm going to try and get back to the dollhouse. I didn't do it all summer long because I have to do it in the garage and it was really hot this summer. So now that things are kind of starting to cool down a little bit, I will try to get back to the colonial miniature dollhouse. So anyway, thank you for watching. God bless, and have a wonderful day. Thank you. Bye.